Now, just as we're going to make a change over here, I'm going to invite Patrick O'Riordan to come and join us, and also Dara Linnett. And while we're doing that, I should point out to you that I actually inadvertently nicked Marian Harkin's the first page of the EU resolution she was reading out. I took it so I could write it down and let you know, but she left it behind her as a souvenir. So I'll just let you know what that is. It's the motion for a resolution dated the 19th of the 11th, 2014. And I can give you the reference number for that if anybody's interested in it, because it does appear that this resolution has got a lot of recommendations and analysis that we're all very, very interested in looking at in greater detail and pursuing. So it's reference RE backslash 104087.4en.doc. Okay, so we can auction this off for the fastest speaker for the morning. Oh yes, and of course we can email it on. And just before I introduce Patrick and Dara, I'd also remind you that the hashtag for this morning is #BetterEU for anybody who is tweeting. Okay, so I'd like to invite our next speakers and introduce our next speakers. First of all, we're delighted to have Patrick. This is my second time meeting you this week. We met on Tuesday morning when the Better Europe Alliance had a meeting with Michael Servos. So Patrick is the European Commission Semester Officer in Ireland. And before this, he worked in the Enterprise and Industry Department in the European Commission as the Sustainable Industrial Policy Coordinator. And you've written a really, really interesting article in the magazine. So we look forward to hearing your response to the breadth of issues raised this morning. So, whichever you like. Do you want to stand up?
Just for people to see you. Yeah, fine. I'll bring my scribbles with me.
Thanks.
Thank you. Indeed, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. What Paul has asked me to do is to respond, indeed, to his remarks and those of Marian. So you have to excuse me if I don't have a nice, coherent PowerPoint slide or any sort of silky or smooth words. What I've been doing is to try to take careful note of what's been said and try and address as many of the issues that have been raised as I can. Obviously, it's a very broad, range of issues, and there's a lot going on. So I'll try and get through as many as I can. I mean, first, a couple of words about myself. I'm one of the Tipperary Europeans, if you're wondering from which part of the continent I'm coming from. And indeed, I've been working in Brussels for many years on a range of different issues, including, as just was said, on the environmental issues and the interface between environmental issues and sustainability issues, or competitiveness issues. So this is, I have an understanding of some of the problems that are out there. I've also worked in human rights areas in the European Commission. So coming here to do this job, I think, is also illustrating a bit the degree to which the Commission is really trying to do its best with limited resources to engage, on the ground practically with as many people as possible. I think there is a real recognition about the need to, be present, be able to have open, frank discussions with groups like yourselves as much as possible. I mean, on that point of engagement, which Paul kind of concluded on there, and Marian Harkin very much had it as well. I mean, a couple of things struck me is that as a Tipperary man, what we don't like in Tipperary is hurlers on the ditch. We like people to sort of involve and play the game, to get involved in the game, to actually engage in the discussions in a constructive manner, which is what is really happening, I think, with this group and what's happening here. It's very easy to sort of be destructive and try and criticize from the sidelines of that. I think the real hard work, but the important work, is done when groups like yourself study the issues, try and understand them, contribute really usefully to the debate. I mean, I think the way in which the semester and the Euro 2020 has been explained and set out in the magazine and other documents that the Alliance has produced is really exemplary. I know that Marian, in the conference in Brussels over the last couple of days, the work that was done there, I can tell you, has been circulated to all the European semester officers. So there's people doing my job in all the different capitals around Europe. So what happened there with the Alliance's work, that was circulated yesterday evening. I got it. The same with all the other semester officers around the place. So this engagement, constructive, working within the system to try and bring about real changes is absolutely key. And I think there is an openness on the Commission side very much to doing that. As well has been mentioned by Marian Harkin and Paul as well, the degree to which the new Commission, there is a new focus. The President has put out his political guidelines. He's come out on the last Friday with the new annual growth survey. I think if you look at that again, it's one of these documents that is a big news for us in the Brussels sphere, but it probably doesn't sort of spread out around as much as it might do. But if you look at that, you will see that there is a significant change of emphasis in terms of prioritising the environmental, the social indicators, the openness, the inclusiveness, the degree to which there's a call to involve discussions with civil society, to bring national parliaments more into the debate. So there are a number of significant, important changes that are introduced already. The Commission has only been in place for 3 or 4 weeks now, but I think that is really important to acknowledge and recognise. Reference was made as well to the investment package. Again, within a short few weeks, this package of 315 billion that has been sort of mobilised and prepared. What will be important is the outcomes of the projects that get financed, but I think to the extent possible, this has shown an enormous motivation to try and get things going. We know there's an investment gap. We know that there's been a necessary, I think, focus on getting fiscal responsibility, on getting excessive budget deficits sorted out. There's a lot of progress made in that. I know in the excessive deficits, of the number that have excessive deficits have gone from 24 in 2011 down to 11 in 2014. So there's progress made on that. As I've said in my article, there is a need now for a rebalancing, for putting an emphasis, probably to a greater extent than has been the case. I mean, we all have priorities that have to be addressed in a certain ranking. So I think that the environmental, the social issues, I think rightly deserve to be given increased attention and priority for the coming years. So there is this pivot, I think, to these sort of things, and we have to be aware of that. Another point that I think came up is the importance of engagement at different levels. As Marion said, the EU budget is 1% of European GDP. There isn't massive pots of money, and the investment package will say, why don't you put more money for grants into that? It's a case of doing as much as you can with the mechanisms and the schemes that are in place. Looking, as I said, I'm going to be a little bit looking down and looking around at some of the notes that I have here as such to see which points need to be taken more into attention. One of the things that was talked about is this importance of having an integrated, a joined up, a coherent approach. Paul was mentioning that the importance of an integrated strategy. What I might mention to that is one of the innovations or things that we're trying to do at European Commission level is to get indeed all the different departments, all the different people working on different aspects of policy, get them together, sit around the same table, looking at these issues collectively. So we have a thing called a country team for Ireland and for all the different countries. So the idea is that you have somebody working on healthcare issues, on employment issues, on environmental, on competitiveness, economic things. Everybody gets together every couple of weeks on a national basis. So for Ireland, there's a country team that works for Ireland. There's a country team for all the different member states. And the idea is that the different priorities and issues that are being looked at there get discussed collectively, and that this attempt, I mean, it's everybody who works in any organisation is aware that silos and this sort of the difficulty of coordinating and getting everybody is always present, and I mean, there's an awful lot of work to be done. But I think there is a real effort being made at the moment to do this, to get these expertise together. As has been mentioned, there is, I think, as well, an openness to engage, sort of have more commissioners. Frankly, it's one of the ideas maybe worth mentioning as well, is to have national commissioners doing more work, coming to their own countries, communicating not just on their own portfolio, but on general issues and all issues that are of relevance in the European sphere. As well as that, there will be sort of what we call technical missions, where we have experts in the different issues coming to Ireland to engage and meet with stakeholders. We're going to have a European 2020 European semester mission at the end of January next year. I mean, I'm involved in the preparations and getting things ready and stuff for that, so we will certainly propose and work to ensure that all of you have a chance through the Better Europe Alliance or whatever to meet with these people and to express, get your views and concerns on the table there. In terms of the particular issues that Paul was particularly highlighting in terms of the CSRs, what's in there, sins of omission and commission is what I wrote down. There are certain things, we would like to see in there. Not everybody's going to be happy with everything that is in those. I mean, in terms of the scope, the range of issues to be covered in that, indeed, as was mentioned, the fiscal responsibility, financial stability and growth pact issues, if you like, they have to be in there. There's a number of those. So this is the mechanism to address those obligations because of the commonly agreed sort of rules and commitments that all member states have entered into to look at those. So they are in there. So there is scope within that to look at a few other broader areas in social environmental spheres. And I think there is a lot of attention and recognition of the points that have been made here. So I would expect that there is scope to look at these. It's always a process of prioritising, discussing and seeing which is more important, and there's a limit to what can be done. But I think there is with the new focus, I would be optimistic of having more focus on some of your issues in the future. Ownership and accountability are two key words that I noted down as well from the remarks. We were in my head of representation and I in the Oireachtas Committee on European Affairs yesterday, and in response to one of the questions, she made the point that we are Europe. Europe is us. It's not some sort of alien or foreign sort of power or something. That we're all part of this. So I mean, as you've seen through your engagement here, access to structures and people, as you said, mentioned, the Director General for DG Employment was in Dublin during the week, meeting with many of the people in this room here. So I think we are Europe, we are Europeans. This is our opportunity to influence change. This is our union, and that we should really work with it and try and get the best outcome of it. Accountability, I mean, we have done, as I've mentioned in the article, we've done a number of public events around the country, regional seminars, where we've gone out trying to explain some of these economic issues and challenges with some economists and people. Again, they're open public events. We're pretty much willing to stand up and take any questions from anybody on anything. We mightn't always have the good answers or the answers we want to hear, but we're willing to try and be open and accountable as much as possible. I've got my 2-minute notice there a couple of seconds ago, so I'm about 28 seconds left, I reckon then, so I'm trying to see then if there are other major issues that have not been covered in my response in terms of what has been said. I'm happy to look at them afterwards with you in the discussion. Beyond GDP was indeed one of the points that Mary mentioned. I myself have been involved in this particular group in the European Commission that is, looking at measuring things beyond those things that get counted in that. I mean, I know Robert Kennedy had a great quotation in that area, and I think there is a certain sympathy for the points behind there. Obviously, economic considerations are going to be a major part of well-being, but I think there is scope to look at that a little bit more. Mentioned indeed the new commissioners for employment and the economic ones working together, bearing witness, I think, to what I've been trying to say about this integrated approach that is part of the ambition of the new commission. So I think I'll leave it at that. Hopefully I've addressed most of the points raised. For those I've missed, happy to have a discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Patrick. I think we are Europe, and Europe is us is a very, very important message to take away from this morning. So I think you will be hearing from us, and the Commission office will be hearing from us again as we begin to take that very, very much on board. I'd like now to introduce Dara Linett. Dara is the Director of the Environmental Protection Agency, with responsibility for the Office of Climate Licensing, Research and Resource Use. And I'd like to thank Dara for joining us this morning and maybe making some response, particularly in relation to the environmental issues raised by the previous speakers.
Thank you very much. I'm also conscious that you've heard a lot of words here this morning, and people might be getting a bit jaded, but just to say, I suppose, thank you for inviting me. This is my first kind of exposure, interaction with this group, so thank you very much, Michael, for inviting me to this group. I hope it will be the start of a longer engagement, because I think what I'd hope to set out here is some of the common goals that both the Environmental Protection Agency has with a lot of your groups. I suppose in terms of my singular response to what I've heard here today would be an endorsement of what is written on page 36 of the lovely brochure that was handed out to everyone. And it says, the material it's too early in the morning for that word, of consumer, the wide use of the, in the, sorry, I'll have to attempt this word, sorry. Profit, can someone help me out? Profigacy. Profligacy, thank you very much. Sorry, I had a brain freeze there. I'm not going to say it again. Of consumer society in depleting key natural resources and placing unsustainable burdens on the planet's ecosystems, establishing a clear resource and environmental limits and integrating these limits into both economic functioning, which we heard a lot about today, and social functioning, which is a lot of the groups here are trying to do, is essential. So I would absolutely endorse that statement, and I would endorse also the number of actions that have been set out that need to be incorporated into the strategy that's here. But what I want to do is maybe put a bit more flesh on that, because I think, like a lot of organisations, the environment is a very tough sell when there's a dominant narrative of the economy. And again, trying to go in, as I will do shortly after this meeting, to the IDA and sell sustainability in their next strategy, or going to the Food Harvest 2020 high-level group and selling sustainability can be a tough sell. And I know that in terms of you're faced with some of the same issues of trying to sell a message that people aren't very open to hearing when the dominant narrative is the economy. So here are just some words maybe of advice that I'm distilling for myself really, but you might find of some relevance to your own journey in trying to influence behaviours and try to change a dominant narrative from where it is. The first is, you've heard a lot today about developing metrics. One of the difficulties I have in the environment is a lot of the outcomes we're chasing are textual based. Changing behaviours is something you tell in a story. It's not amenable to outputs. Outputs are amenable to numbers, but outcomes are amenable to textual stories. And that's a very difficult thing to do when you're only given 30 seconds to comment at a Vox Pop, or you're only given 3 or 4 minutes in terms of a talk like this. So I would encourage you to set for yourselves the metrics that you can communicate very sharply and very easy. 3 things you need to know about my organisation. Now within that, once you have that, you can advocate for a national target, because I would endorse again what was said today. It is really important that you get the government to set, whether it's climate change, and my difficulty is in research or sustainability. We heard some of the European targets there for research that we're not meeting. One of my areas I'm responsible for is environmental research. Very hard to get environmental research on in the dominant nature of prioritisation of research for jobs. Whereas a lot of the research that I would be advocating for is to solve some of the problems that are difficult to solve in terms of water quality, air quality and sustainability. So national targets should be a real goal for all the organisations here for your area. The third thing I would say is you need to together try and compare yourselves to international statistics. Because the first question people ask you, well, why should I care about that? The easiest thing then to combat that is, do you know what? We are 28 out of 30 countries in OECD in this area. So again, like myself, I continually try to advocate 3 things you need to know about the environment. We are so far behind on the national target. And by the way, we're 15th, 20th, 3rd or 5th in Europe. And that allows you then to get into the debate in a much quicker way than some of the textual narratives that all of us are involved in, which are very good but very hard to communicate. The fourth thing is, and I advocate this, is to reduce subsidies and price in the total cost of things. Now you might say, what does that have to do with yourselves? For me, this is, we're all paying on our ESB bill for peat going into power stations, which to me as an environmentalist is crazy. You know, we're digging a carbon sink out of the ground, we're putting it into an energy plant, and then we're releasing carbon dioxide out through the air. So from my point of view is, why are we grant aiding that type of activity, and why is everyone not paying the full cost of that in terms of where we need to get our fuel. Likewise with yourselves, where is public money going that is actively going against the aims of your organisation? Are people being subsidised in the economy through taxation that are actively going against the aims of your, and you should seek to stop those subsidies and to truly cost in, whether it's building regulations to allow for disabled entry. When I walk around Wexford and I see the number of houses that have 3 steps on the front door, complete barrier to people with disabilities. So how many grants were given to those houses, or taxation breaks given to the people who built those houses, but still provided houses that go against the fundamental outcomes you're trying to achieve? So you need to be aware of where the subsidies in this society are going so you can stop them, and you need to start pricing in what the total cost of having inclusivity in terms of access, in terms of all the other issues that were raised today. I think we need to increase from a sustainable way our own resource efficiency, and that means that we need to use things for far longer. New is not always better. We need cars that we hang on to for 15 years, not 2 years. These are simple messages. But also we need to focus on big gains. So for example, from my point of view, one of the biggest gains, and it'll come in a lot with your own objectives, is one, we need to insulate houses. The biggest singular gain for the environment at the moment is if we insulate every house to the maximum ability. Second thing, farming. We need to be absolutely to get the most productivity out of the farms because of the environmental impact that farming has. And the third thing is food waste. If we did those 3 things in Ireland, and I think in food waste, a lot of what the EPA is supporting, particularly you heard on the news down in Cork, the St Vincent de Paul, in terms of the food depot, seed funding was given by the EPA to that programme as part of its Stop Food Waste campaign. But if that is an activity, those 3 things are activities that would give life to rural communities and to your own communities in terms of sustainable work and work that would give people pride. Green procurement. The government spends a lot of money on a lot of things, and it goes through a procurement system. We've just produced a green procurement guide, but how much is being procured with taxpayers' money that is going to systems or services that go against the objectives of your organisation? And why is that the case? So one of the easiest things to do, and again it's part of our pricing in the true cost of this, are services being purchased by the government that are actively non-inclusive, that are preventing access and preventing people gaining employment. And the last thing, and again, these are all messages that I'm saying to my own staff and within the agency, the last thing is to support community-based social change. And you might say that's a big word, but for me, this is what it means. I know that I have to get clean water by a certain target date in Europe. I know that if I fix wastewater treatment plants, if I stop farming, polluting rivers, that'll get me about 80% of the way, maybe 90% if I'm lucky. But I know the last 10% will be on the basis of communities taking care of the rivers themselves. And that means people patrolling the rivers, taking care, adopting rivers, and that is the same whether it be about social inclusion. It's people within the community looking after the elder, people in their community, people in the community looking after the disabled in their community, people looking at resource efficiency within the community. Government knows that it can't do everything itself, but it doesn't know how to include organisations with yourself. So I would welcome any debate about how we can get community organisations like yourself to help agencies like the EPA to achieve what it has to achieve, and also help you achieve what you have to achieve by together delivering targets that we all have to achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Darren. I'd like to take some questions now because from the floor, because we've been hearing a lot this morning, so thank you for all your patience with that. And I just want to check that everybody's warm, cool enough, that the temperature in the room is okay, before we take some questions and move to a coffee break. Okay? Okay. We've heard a lot, and I'm hearing a lot about how much the EU structures and the kinds of work that Dara and Patrick are doing needs us as much as we need them, and how much there's a mutuality in that, and an increasing recognition in Europe about the social targets that we need to be looking at. So What I'm going to invite you to do is maybe to turn to the person next to you and maybe make some comment, just one each, on something that strikes you about all the things that you've said this morning, just so that we all get a chance to exercise our own thoughts on this, and then we'll take some questions from the floor. Is that okay?
There's a synopsis of a half an hour. No, you can't. You don't get to do it. No, because I'm going to give it another presentation. That would be fair. But I'll give you a synopsis. I'm going to give this presentation. I was going to give this presentation today, but it needs a full treatment. So I'm not going to spend enough to be another officer. It's not really a full treatment. So I have no problem with the need synopsis of the slides. So I'm just taking it prepared to the slides. You just don't understand.
Brilliant. Two things going on tonight. I mean, I'm going to bring this crowd back before. Okay. It seems there is quite a lot to discuss, which is really, really good. So we're going to take some questions from the floor, because it's not often that we'd have the opportunity to speak to Dara or to speak to Patrick and to ask them some questions that we might have. So I'm going to take some questions. Dermot, I see your hand there, and then I see Liz, your hand as well. If there's any other hands I can't see, can you let me see them? And Pierre. And this lady over here as well. So I've got 4 questions so far. We might go with that. We have 5. Jonathan down at the back. I wouldn't doubt you. Okay, and then so first of all, Dermot. And Dermot, I might ask you to be brief if that's okay, because we're all between ourselves and coffee now at this point. Dermot, can you introduce yourself first, perhaps?
I'm Dermot Woods. A disability comes from a member of inner life. Okay. I have 2 points. We not Irish, we European. We're white color. I must have my PA money in any part of Europe. That's number 1. Number 2 is Europe have dictated to Ireland that we should leave our duty on our moral taxation for the motive question.
Okay. Dermot, I got the first point. Dermot Walsh, disability consultant. I got the first point about being able to have freedom of movement across the EU and bring your PA with you. Is that correct? If we are European, why can you not do that? And the second point I didn't get.
The second point is, why have Europe said we shouldn't be able to get the tax back on the motor fuel?
Tax back on motor fuel, is it? Okay. I'm going to move on. Thanks for those 2, Dermot. I'm just going to take some other questions. Liz, do you want to introduce yourself and give us your question briefly?
Yeah, I'm Liz Cairns from the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. And I really just want to add a comment to Dara's comment about the issue of grant aid and subsidy. And really, it relates more to the private sector, really. And it's that we really need to have more transparency in relation to grant aid, subsidy, tax breaks given to the private sector. We don't really know what the benefits are, what the actual cost is, first of all, to the state, because it's not enumerated in the same way as the cost of, let's say, public services or the kind of grants that are given to the community and voluntary sector to provide services. So first of all, we need to have availability of data in relation to subsidies to the private sector, and then to actually think about what the actual benefits that are arising or not, or the costs that are arising are. So there's a debate happening about this in the UK at the moment, particularly amongst academic research. And as it asks questions like, instead of asking, can we afford the poor, it asks questions like, can we afford the rich and can we afford the private sector? So I think in order to balance the debate, we need a slight change in the debate and a slight change in the narrative and a change in data in relation to what's subsidised by the state. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Liz. I'm taking that's more a comment than a question. Okay, lovely, thanks. Pierre, would you like to make your point? Can we get the mic up? Thanks.
I had a question to Dara about the vision concerning the food waste issue, because from a point of view of an organization trying to represent people in extreme poverty, the idea that we become more efficient to direct food waste towards people in need raises questions about is it a rights approach, or is it a dignifying approach to do that? Yeah.
Lovely, thanks, Pierre. And this lady over here on the right-hand side, sorry, if you might introduce yourself as well and tell us what organisation you're from.
Okay, I'm not from an organisation. My name's Lucy Weir, and I've just completed a PhD. Is this switched on? No. It is. Okay. I've just completed a PhD in environmental philosophy, so I was particularly interested in Dara's presentation. I really applaud the efforts here. I made a real effort to come here myself because I was interested to see whether or not there could be a paradigm shift within the EU and how it approaches things like our ecological catastrophe. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that anything that I've heard so far, bar what Dara said, which I found very interesting about the textual nature of the way of assessing what's going on in environmental terms. I found that very useful. But apart from that, I don't really see, and I certainly didn't see anything from what Marion said about a real paradigm shift. And I would just like to suggest that perhaps we consider models from other parts of the world. For example, in Bhutan, there's a completely different approach to measuring success in social terms. They use what's called a well-being index, and it's used in various other places as well. And it's a very successful approach, as far as I know. I mean, I don't know the details of it, but that might be, a real paradigm shift. Because as far as
Lucy, I think that you probably have a lot to say about this.
Absolutely. Yeah? I'll just finish by saying that one instance, first of all, the population issue hasn't been raised at all, the human population expansion. It's a very difficult issue for people to talk about, given religious interests. And the second thing is that the farming industry and the growth in the dairy sector in this country, for example, hasn't been mentioned, and yet it's in direct conflict with some of the aims that have been mentioned here.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm sure we could hear a lot more from you and will throughout the morning, so we'll hold those points and take them on board. Jonathan, you had a quick question down at the back there. Can I restrict you to one sentence, a one-sentence question? Would that be okay? Can you wait till you get the mic and then introduce yourself? Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Joan. Just on Paul's presentation, in terms of Intrio, and it's a comment, I stand to be corrected. As far as I know, Intrio is being privatised, and it's going to be results driven, that in terms of a private company, some come from the UK, that they won't be paid in terms of they won't receive a payment, companies, after 13 weeks. So that's all I'm going to say, Joan.
Okay, thanks very much, Jonathan. I'm not going to take any more questions now because I think we have enough for the panel to deal with. I don't know who wants to go first. Dara, you've got a lot of stuff there to answer to. And I'm going to ask Dara to keep this brief. So you might grab him during the coffee break and you're able to hang around for the morning, are you? Okay. Dara will be here for the coffee break. So anything that he doesn't cover, because you can blame me, I'm shortening him. And you can catch him during the coffee.
I'm going to be very quick. The lady, I forgot your name there, from St Vincent de Paul, I absolutely agree with you. Research is absolutely important, and a bit of a plug here. The Research Council is about to promote the Government of Ireland postdoctorate scholarship scheme, of which the EPA and a few other organisations, including the Department of Health, have come together to put all their postdoctoral schemes or doctoral schemes into the one, so you get to choose. I would fully encourage you to link in to graduate programs or doctorate programs that would allow to dig up the data that you need to produce the type of data around taxation and transparency. That is available to you. The Research Council is one of the big bodies, so have a look at their website, see how you can get them. And one of the innovative things is to maybe get a fellow that would work with you for a year to try and extract and pull out the data that you might not know yourselves that you have, in order to produce genuine research that would influence policies. So just that's one hint. Food waste, absolutely. Food waste is a much broader issue than waste food. It is about food that's not used, doesn't use resources. And food that never makes it to the supermarket because it's an odd shape is food waste. So it goes right from generation right through to ultimate. So the issue that you're talking about is whether food waste should go to people, and the answer is absolutely not. No food waste should ever go to any person, and I don't think, nor should it be assumed that the situation down at Cork by Vincent de Paul is in any way food waste going to people from certain socioeconomic. It is about food that is absolutely perfectly okay, packaging maybe a bit wrong or whatever, and I would have no philosophical complaints about that.
Be a food bank or running that.
Yeah, exactly. BF Food Bank is who I was alerting to. In regard to Lucy, I would disagree with her in that I think Marion Harkin actually was trying to advocate that social is trying to get on to counteract the dominant economic narrative, and I think that's what she was saying this morning. I think that Wellbeing Index, in my bag is the OECD Subjective Index of Wellbeing, and their latest report on it is what I'm reading at the moment. I think that is exactly the type of metrics I was talking about that could be internationalized, that all of us could use to put forward why we need to change the direction of this country. And again, in terms of population and dairy, I suppose you have to take it in the point, nearly half the population don't eat meat, for example, currently. And haven't access to dairy. So it is a much more complex problem than just population and just and the dairy. But I think it's part of some of the stuff I'm doing with Food Harvest 2020, for example. You know, they've just launched their 2025 targets, our strategy, to start the strategy process. We've released data in Wednesday that got no news coverage because all the correspondents are over in Lima. That agricultural emissions have gone up, so as transport emissions have gone up in carbon. So we seem to be tracking the economy nearly exactly, which is not what we want.
Excellent, Dara. Thank you, and thank you for being succinct with this. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Patrick, who's got a few comments on the transfer of or the freedom of movement with PAs throughout Europe, and some more of the issues. And Paul, I don't know if you want to come in, and anyone. But just before that, Jonathan, your point about Intrio and whether the jobs path pays, we might pick that up later. I think it's in the understanding, and I know Breed O'Brien is here, she might actually pick up on that as well. So we might hold that one if that's okay.
Thanks very much. On the first point that Dermot made about the freedom of movement for PAs and that, I mean, obviously freedom of movement is something that is very... No, to hold it right here. It's something that's very, held very dear in the EU. So this is something, I mean, obviously very concerned about. I'm not aware of the particular issues with regard to PAs or that, but as Marion mentioned, if it's a particular issue that's being addressed and being discussed in the European Parliament and other organs, the Commission will obviously engage in that and do whatever it can to find a reasonable solution. In terms of the, I mean, just I wanted to come in, Pierre mentioned about the food waste a bit on that, just to, I said in my previous incarnation, I was doing some work with industrial symbiosis and recycling and this. So I was at a very nice event last week here in Dublin with the SMILE Resource Exchange organisation. Michelle Green is running that. It was actually launched by An Taoiseach, and this is, you know, this idea of industrial symbiosis, reusing sort of the output of one industry being the input for another one. This is gaining a lot of traction. It's something we in DG Enterprise were promoting quite a lot in European circles. I think there is, you know, increasing recognition that there's enormous scope potential for this. A lot of industries have outputs in food, part of it, and that can be very effectively used as an input and used by other industries or organisations. So with a view to maximising benefit on the economic and the environmental side of things. Just perhaps briefly, just to echo what's been said in response to Lucy's points. I mean, I think the paradigm shift in terms of the EU and this, I mean, you know, I would clearly say the EU has been and continues to lead absolutely in the environmental sphere in climate negotiations. I was in Copenhagen, I was in Rio for the UN summit. The EU has been at the forefront and is pushing and going out on a limb to bring these issues forwards and to try and engage with the US and China and others. You know, hopefully we will get some other people stepping up to the plate and addressing this. I think the targets that have been set in the Europe 2020, the action that has been done in Ireland and other countries, you know, is not enough, but it is leading the way, and we will continue to lead in that direction.
So yeah, I just will mention very briefly about the question from Jonathan about Intrio. Yes, the government has decided to, or is privatising the part of the public employment service that deals with those people who are long-term unemployed, who are more than a year unemployed. It's called JobPath. It's a new programme, and 2 private contractors are coming in to work with people who are long-term unemployed, and that'll start to roll out shortly. So Intrio will still deal with those people who are unemployed in short-term, so less than a year, and JobPath for a number of years then will engage with those who are long-term unemployed. And they'll be paid on results.